What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and this is Top 10 Thursday. As I record this video, it is now June 2021, which means we're about halfway through this year itself, and honestly, it's been a pretty fun year so far for gamers. We have the next-gen consoles, there's all sorts of exclusives coming out, there's some pretty big expansions and DLC. I mean, from indie stuff to gigantic games, it seems like this has been a fun year, even in this first 6 months. So what I wanted to do today is actually try and count down the best of the best, the cool games that I've absolutely loved thus far before the gigantic holiday releases managed to sneak up on us. Now for this video, we're making two gigantic rules for it. Number one, a game has to be something completely new. It has to be something like the Mass Effect trilogy. As much as I love it, it's just a very, very fancy and very high-polished re-release, whereas something like Bowser's Fury, this is something that's actually got some pretty new content in it, so this does count as something I would consider a new game. And additionally, it has to have been released in 2021, so I'm not going to be talking about ports, remasters. As great as Days Gone is on PC, it's just not getting talked about here because it's not technically a new release. Alright, do we have that established? Are we all ready? Alright, well, put on your gaming hats. It's time to count down the top 10 best experiences so far in 2021. Number 10. Returnal. Now, it's obvious that everybody has bad days. There's those times where you get in a car accident, or your girlfriend breaks up with you, or somehow you get stuck in an infinite time loop on an alien planet and you're unable to escape your own infinite darkness. Well, that's actually the plot of Returnal. In this game, we're playing as an astronaut named Celine, who's just been stuck on this random, weird, creepy, abandoned world, where every time she dies, she wakes up in her ship again, forced to fight, just continuously going through rearranging dungeons, getting upgrades, getting guns, getting every possible chance to try and possibly escape. Now this game is incredibly addictive, but it's also so mysterious. It's one of those games that the deeper you get into it, the more it manages to bring up more questions than answers. And while it's definitely not a perfect game, it's the first game that really came to PlayStation 5 that made me think of the potential of the platform, and I'm certainly very glad I played it. Number 9. Hitman 3. This is a series that I've always loved, mostly because of the main character, which is Agent 47. He's a scientifically crafted ultimate assassin, somebody who's the master of every single weapon. He understands poison, disguises, trickery, and because of this, he's able to stealth kill any target on the planet. And that basically gets tested in Hitman 3 as you are given some completely impossible objectives, sneaking into a winery filled with all sorts of evil gangsters, or trying to scale the tallest tower in the world to take out a billionaire as he launches a new product line. Like, every single mission is a different, completely insane task, but it also manages to feel so goofy and humorous. A major reason that Hitman 3 is such an impressive feat is that it manages to be so dark and twisted, and yet so self-aware. It is a video game that acknowledges the absurdity of its actions, but really lets you revel in it. It's one of those games that you like going through the missions again and again, putting on different costumes, trying different routes, and really getting a chance to appreciate every aspect of Agent 47. Number 8. Bowser's Fury. Super Mario 3D World got a re-release this year, which managed to be a decent remaster. It basically had better frame rates, some extra content, and definitely a lot more speed to it. When this game originally released on the Wii U, it was already a very fun game, but when it came to the Nintendo Switch, they decided to spice it up with something a little bit extra, which was Bowser's Fury. Now, when I initially saw this, I thought it would be just a tiny little experience, a tiny gimmick, if you will, when, in fact, Bowser's Fury, to me, feels like an evolution of Mario itself. This game actually is open world for the first time ever. You get a chance to explore this gigantic map that can make Mario feel almost tiny in comparison, trying to run through these gigantic fun gauntlets. And on top of that, I like the idea that Bowser keeps showing up randomly to try and smush you into a pancake. Now this, to me, it manages to show a sense of progress, a new style of Nintendo, and it makes me excited for, well, honestly, just another Mario game like this. I hope we can get another game that manages to have all this fun without the load screens, an ability to just seamlessly slip in and out of these different levels, and kind of see a different direction to Mario himself. Number 7. Oddworld Soulstorm. There's something extra difficult about making good modern 2D games. If you're going to do something that's a side-scroller, it needs to have something that's going to really grab people's attention. Because let's face it, if you're only able to go left, right, up, and down, you better have some really engaging story or some really fun puzzles to manage to strike you in a way that doesn't feel like everything else. Well, thankfully, Oddworld Soulstorm is an incredibly freaking good 2D platforming shooter-style puzzle game. It kind of manages to combine a bunch of different genres of side-scrolling action, but additionally, what managed to get me the most is definitely just this really unique world, this idea of a planet that's just so far into crazy industrialized scum, where people are being forced into slavery to work in gigantic infinite factories, and now Abe, being the messiah of the Mudokons, which are the name of these little frog-like people, he has to try and lead them to victory. Now this game completely just stunned me, because, I mean, I've liked previous Oddworld games, but this one, it manages to be honestly one of the best 2D puzzle games I've ever played in my life. It just manages to be so fun, so gripping, and I actually cared about these people. Whenever I screwed up and one of these Mudokons gets dropped into a grinder or sees a particularly grisly demise, I cared about it. I wanted to win the game, but more than that, I wanted the Mudokons to get the freedom that they definitely deserve. Number 6. Nier Replicant. Okay, so I know I started off the rules of this video of no remasters, no remakes, but Nier Replicant, it feels different, because first and foremost, this game, when it originally came out way back in the day on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, it was a bit of a broken mess, or at least that's what a lot of people said. There were gameplay issues, there were weird, just essential errors in it, whereas this game is a complete different redo. This game has managed to be updated, the voice acting is fantastic, and more than that, they actually overhauled the gameplay to be a lot more fun. Nier Replicant is one of those games that I feel like is objectively art. It manages to really challenge your ideas of different camera angles and storytelling and different plot twists. And something I definitely respect the most about it is that in order to fully understand the story of Nier Replicant, you have to beat it over and over and over again, unlocking different pages of this grander tale. It's a game that definitely, well, I feel like it admires the gamer. Like, there's no other way to put it. It understands your time, it understands your focus, and it basically says, give us a bit more and we'll give you everything. And because of that, I really have to give it some accolades as one of the best games of the year, hands down. Number 5. Little Nightmares 2. I swear to you I'm not crazy for putting this just so high up in the list, but really, honestly, this game is just so high quality. Little Nightmares 2 is a very, very good horror game that manages to exemplify the spookiness of environments. In this game, we're this little tiny kid who's trying to creep through an area that's filled with cannibalistic giants, and what it essentially creates is this gigantic game of deadly hide and seek, times where you're having to go through vents, sneak behind bookshelves, or sometimes even beat things to death with a pipe in order to manage to make it past that next big monster. As a project, this game really intrigues me because of all the subtle details, the times where there's just unspoken storyline going on, times where you see drag marks in the background, clearly showing people all died here, or a pile of shoes, but there's nobody around, so you can just assume that a bunch of people went into one of these ovens built for children and stuff. Like, the game manages to be so dark, so macabre, and yet you can't stop playing it. Little Nightmares 2 is a game that I wish you would try. Even if you're not typically into horror, this is a game you should definitely check out. Number 4. Persona 5 Strikers. Now for this entry alone, I have to be a bit more vague, because obviously the Persona series is most famous for its incredibly good storylines, the gigantic twists, the fun character elements, but for this, I want to just talk a bit about the gameplay and the themes of it. We're playing as a bunch of high school kids who have just discovered they have powers that basically allow them to go into the souls of corrupted people and try and battle their inner demons. Now the first game was all about turn-based combat. The original Persona 5 was incredibly good, good, but Strikers goes in a more action-y focus. This time around we get a chance to freely roam the map, do all sorts of gigantic fights, and at times have this almost Hyrule Warriors style combats. Times where you get the chance to just fight off hundreds and hundreds of enemies all in one gigantic sloppy battlefield. And to me, this feels like a good next step. Like, it feels like a nice chance to be very still rooted in the original concepts of an RPG, but also have so much more to it. And additionally, I actually love some of the things they've done with the characters themselves. This game takes place more in like a summer vacation theme, so we get a chance to see them actually kicking back and relaxing. One of the problems I've had with RPGs over the years is that we don't get a chance to see characters actually enjoy their lives. We see heroes save the world or do all sorts of gigantic feats of strength, but we don't get a chance to see them just kind of enjoy themselves, to kick back, to actually be rewarded for their hard work. But Persona 5 Strikers actually manages to have that balance. It shows these kids having fun, being cool high schoolers, but also managing to completely defeat armies of demons all at once. And for that, I love, love, love it. Number 3. It Takes Two. There's this unique and very energetic game director called Joseph Fares, who's a guy who definitely loves video games, and he loves the idea of friendship being part of the gameplay. He makes games that are forced co-op. You cannot play this in any other way but except with a friend by your side. Now, this to me is an interesting mechanic, but It Takes Two was a journey I am never going to forget. So in this game, you're playing as a husband and wife who have suddenly been cursed to suddenly become these little magic dolls and essentially go on a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style adventure. You're tiny in a world that is way too big, and it turns out that the entire world is also filled with magic. Going into a tree, you suddenly realize that the squirrels who live there are little tiny army soldiers who make gigantic guns, or make a weird plane out of your underpants, or a level where you're actually having to have fidget spinner hovercrafts that allow you to fly around in huge stages, or one of my personal favorites is this spooky castle that suddenly gives you like Diablo style powers, and it goes to a top-down experience. Every chapter of this game is completely different, from the gameplay to the camera angles to the controls. Like literally every part of this, it is like 9 tiny games perfectly crammed together with the most delicious glue you could possibly imagine. Well, I mean, glue isn't supposed to be delicious, but It Takes Two is one of those games that just completely freaking exploded my brain. Seriously, I'm never going to forget a single part of this, because more than just the story of seeing this husband and wife go on this very daring journey together and trying to mend their broken relationship, it's just the fact that having to scream at my best friend sometimes that he's killing me by accident, or trying to solve puzzles that require both of us to be in perfect tandem, like driving a boat where each of us can only control one freaking cannon and one freaking wheel, and having to paddle and fight off a bunch of gigantic deadly octopuses. This game is an utter piece of perfection, and I'm so freaking glad that I got a chance to give it a chance. Number 2. Resident Evil 8 Village. How do I even talk about this? Like, I'm a bit confounded because there's so many different directions I could take this. Resident Evil Village does so much right, from its very cool design of monsters that have lichens and vampires, or just the gigantic bosses that manage to be so gooey and terrifying at once, to just the subtle scares, times where you're just alone in a hallway trying to solve a puzzle and you hear a sudden bump behind you that you assume might be a next gigantic deadly beastie. This game manages to do everything right, and it gives you so many different flavors of terror in it. Now, I've beaten this game 11 times. That's not a joke. I finished this game 11 times. The hardest difficulty, the easiest difficulty, I've unlocked pretty much every single freaking facet of this. I've speedrun it, and the reason I play through this game again and again, literally every week since it's come out, is because Resident Evil Village is more than anything extremely fun. It's a first-person shooter that manages to make your hands tremble as you enjoy pulling that trigger for the next next big headshot, upgrading my guns, finding those next unlockable pieces to make it where my character is going to be bigger and stronger. It's such a rare joy to find a game that manages to just make it where you're afraid to keep playing, but you're more scared to stop. It's one of those games that manages to be addictive because you get so invigorated by the idea of what's going to come up next. Even when you memorize it, at this point I know where every single monster is, and I still just have so much fun watching them jump out and say, "Boo, I scared you." This game is utterly fantastic, from the things that are trying to hunt you down to the very cheesy dialogue and the huge plot twists. This game is exactly what I think Resident Evil should have become, and I'm glad we've managed to arrive here. Number 1. Monster Hunter Rise. You know what? I'm just going to say it. This game is deceptively good because on the surface, it seems so simplistic. The idea of Monster Hunter is, of course, just trying to hunt some monsters. We get dropped into different biomes, from volcanoes to beautiful forests to desolate wastelands of the ice. There's different environments that you have to go into, and each of them is just packed with totally different styles of monsters that look different, they fight different, they behave different. And so because of it, the best part of Monster Hunter Rise is certainly just trying to track and hunt these beasts. It's trying to learn their movements, it's studying them, it's figuring out their weaknesses, it's making sure that you're ready for these impossibly large fights sometimes, whether you're alone or with your partners. Rise really managed to strangely grab my attention more than I thought it would because, well, there's just something about the idea of trying to smash these monsters to bits. Every time you fight them, you manage to break parts of them off, some spines, some bones, some claws, some nails, some teeth, and go back to town to craft ever better armor. There's this constant, perpetual improvement, constantly trying to make yourself strong enough to handle the next crazy hunt. But that's really only half the addictive nature to this. I really enjoy the escalation of the intelligence. Like, there's something about this game that feels so smart. It feels like if I take the time to do the stat sheets, if I take the time to actually watch and observe and learn what my foe is going to do, I definitely appreciate it more. Like, I'm kind of rambling because Monster Hunter Rise is one of those games that almost defies explanation. It's one of those games that you have to be out there with your gigantic braid sword, quivering in a bush, about to fight a dragon for you to understand why it is the best of the best. I have logged so many hours in this game, and now they've released tons of free updates. There's so many extra monsters, so many extra events. This is a game that just is so deep and keeps getting deeper. And for that reason, I am happy to award it my favorite game of 2021 so far. Did your favorite game not make the list? Got an idea for a future top 10? Please tell me all about it in the comments down below. And additionally, there's a lot more videos coming soon. Reviews, rants, all sorts of crazy topics. And there is technically some stuff I still have not beaten this year, like Bravely Default 2 and some extra little expansions and stuff that I need to finish before this year is through. 2021 is still heating up, there's still a lot to come, and now I guess we gotta buckle up for some crazy E3 announcements, because this year just keeps getting bigger and better. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please smash that like button, it seriously helps out, but do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. Oh man, you know what, I'm still blown away that Bowser's Fury was so legit. I kind of thought, you know, it's a little bit short, but I really like it. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.